To me, this is not just another nation. It is not just one of the family of nations. This is a nation with a great mission to perform for the benefit of liberty-loving people everywhere.
That we shall be as a city upon a hill.
These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will, in this crisis, shrink from the service of his country.
You've come to fight as free men. Free men you are. What will you do without freedom?
Proclaim liberty throughout all the land.
In one voice, we will not go quietly into the night. We will not vanish without a fight. You gotta fight for your right. Damn you, digger!
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another edition of Real News in your morning hour time slot. My name is David Shine Thompson, sitting over there beside me on your screen. What an awesome morning we have here, an awesome morning to be alive. Fantastic content, as you're seeing in the description section right there. Quick note here, Evernote is the tab, the link you'll see right underneath the title of this program. Click that. It's the better formatted version of the show notes that we'll be going through today. Also, I'm looking at it right now on my screen. Right there in the screen, you're looking at top right-hand corner, directly under the title, you'll see a little following tab. Click the following tab, and directly next to that, we've received questions from a lot of our followers asking, hey, why can't I ever see when you go live? How come I never get these notifications? That little bell up there, that bell icon, if you hover over that or if you click on that, it'll give you an option to select all the notifications, any of that stuff. Click that all button. It'll let you know when we go live. Even if you just click the highlight buttons, it'll at least let you know when we go live. But the all button will let you know when we do all the things out here. David Shine Thompson, buddy, how you doing this morning, man? We had a good night last night.
We really did, yeah. I'm still living off the energy from last night's stream that we did with all the great, contributors to Real News and volunteers with Americans for Prosperity. We did the stream last night on stopping state bailouts. Very successful. We had so many people share the stream and liked it and put it on other people's pages, and I really think that at least in our little sphere here, you know, our 1 or 2 degrees of separation away from Real News and whatever, I think we really got the message out that that these state bailouts are negative, and we're going to stay on it over the course of the next, well, as long as they're debating it, hopefully over the course of the whole month, because it'll take that long. That'd be great if it takes that long, because that means there's real debate happening. But a great time last night, and a big thanks to all of our guests who participated with us last night. We had 6 guests on the show. Yeah, man. And we did it in an hour. I was proud of us. Yeah. We kept a schedule and everything. It was so good. You did a great job, too. Awesome. And we should all thank Mr. Henry for anchoring that last night. He did so good.
Dude, our guest just knocked that out of the park too, man. And the tech back inside there, man, of the seamless transitions and stuff going on behind the scenes. I wish there could be a portion of the show so we could just show everybody what Sean is doing on the back end of what it looks like on the Zoom screen. Because I can see that stuff. Y'all are unfortunately not able to see that. I can see everything that's going on.
He's acting like it's cool. You wouldn't care if you saw it. It's not that cool.
I think they would care.
You think they would care? All right, well, maybe I'll do a stream where I'm like, this is how we do it. You know, I'll do one of those streams sometimes. But what's on tap today, buddy?
Yeah, man, there's a new petition up in the top of the screen, by the way, if you want to help us with the reject bailout movement. This new petition goes directly to targeted legislators. All right, so there's been specific legislators that the company is looking at that are saying, like, hey, we could really use your support on this particular issue. So shifting strategies a little bit there to look at particular legislators going, sign that letter will now go directly to those particular legislators. On tap today, though, as you'll see in the headline there, Facebook, man, names 20 new people. They're all new, just 20 people in general to what they're calling their Supreme Court, or Content Moderation Supreme Court.
Grant, let me just stop right there, because I saw that in the show notes. I didn't get a chance to talk to you before the show, and now is as good a time as ever. What do you think about some private company creating an institution and calling it a court? Man, why not call it a committee or review board? I mean, don't you feel like that's a little bit like, I don't know, I can't think of the right word, either appropriation or fraud. Like, a court is a specific thing. You can't have like a fake court, right?
No, I mean, and honestly, man, like that was my absolute initial take from this. That's exactly where I went with the thing too. My problem with it was when you have about Facebook talking about, deciding, and they call it their Supreme Court. And look, man, now's as good a time as any to get into this conversation. Let us know how you feel in Facebook section. We'll do the greatest audience in the nation appreciation segment here in
Facebook
just
needs
a
a
minute.
copyright strike from the Supreme Court of the United States. That's what needs to happen.
But I mean, I'm telling you, man, like when they call it a Supreme Court for moderating content, I'm not exaggerating. They're putting actual Supreme Court potential nominees on this court selection. That is what they're doing.
Not like past Supreme Court people, but people who might be on the Supreme Court one day.
Yes.
That's
like
weird.
Potential picks for the legitimate United States of the Supreme Court. They're putting it on. So when you
let's just go ahead and start the fascist utopia. Let's just go ahead and blend the judicial system and the private tech industry. Let's just go ahead and do that. That's been really fine in every other industry, like military production, healthcare. It's been fine when we've just mixed the government and private sector. Golly, Grant, this is frightening.
Dude, it really is, man. And that's my biggest problem with this thing is I mean, like David and I, we started Real News about 2 or 3 years ago when we were doing this on the AM/FM side back in Knoxville. I had a problem with some of these stories primarily because at that time, and even now, the court of public opinion meant almost more than the actual courts of law did. And I would venture to say that that's probably still what's going on currently. I mean, look at the current Joe Biden situation. I would venture to say it really doesn't matter all that much if that guy was ever proven to be guilty of anything, nor Donald Trump for that matter. The court of public opinion what's going to drive. And when it comes to application of the First Amendment, exceptions to or violations of, it doesn't matter. What is inherent in that is that there's a government entity at play. There's a government actor, meaning the government of the United States or some state government or local municipality is the one that has to be restricting your speech. Well, none of that matters anymore. The actual First Amendment doesn't necessarily matter if 2.6 billion people are out here on this Facebook community, and Facebook is the one that's now determining what is and is not deemed as free speech. Oh, by the way, there's a couple hundred countries that are probably on this site as well. So which country? That's the inevitable question, Sean. And that's the problem that I have with something like this, is when Facebook comes out here and says, hey, we're going to look at the headline. It's in the show notes. I'll pull it up in just a second. It's from NBC. Here's the exact quote. Facebook names 20 people to its, quote, Supreme Court for content moderation. And they go on to tell you who these 20 people are. 3 of them are people that have actually been tapped to sit on the United States Supreme Court. These are the names. Pamela Karlan, a Stanford law professor who is a favorite of liberals. McConnell, who's also a Stanford law professor and a conservative former judge appointee from President George W. Bush. Some of these folks might actually be sitting on the actual Supreme Court.
It's not just the judicial system and tech. It's also the academic institutions, the judicial system and tech. Just listening to the academic institutions those people come from, it seems like there's a particular kind of person, so to speak, that they want on this board. A certain kind of person, someone who's been educated the right way, that went to the right graduate school and went to the right jurisprudence school, and then maybe went to the right, what do they call those things that are after graduate school that aren't actually school? They're like institutes where you get commissions or indoctrinated. I can't remember. Like Rhodes is one of those where you go after you graduate. The Rhodes Scholar people. It's like a thing you go to after you graduate to get indoctrinated before you can enter into the market that you're trying to get in. It's where elites go after college, so other elites know that they're elites, and you don't have to do that when you go to Ivy League. But it's Mr. Henry. I want to clarify. We got some comments in the chat. That's why I jumped in. I should jump right to that. Kel says, I like the platform. I hate that they are censoring and putting together a board of censors. Daniel Snowden says, oh, good God, get over that. There's no confusion about that. Kind of like saying it's been bad for a long time. He's so funny. Let's see. Mike says, I hope some Hollywood stars are on the committee too. I know they all have our best interest at heart. That's pretty funny. But I don't know. So this worries me in the way that not yet. Like, I want to agree with Daniel Snowden that, yes, we've been dealing. And like you were even saying, Mr. Henry, we kind of essentially lost the First Amendment in the 2015 to 2017 culture wars. We lost our, 2014, 2017 culture wars. We lost our First Amendment because, like you said, it doesn't matter if I can go to the public square if essentially the societal public square is on the internet run by a private corporation that censors me.
Right.
So we have been dealing with this for a long time. What I worry about is when people put government institution titles in their titles so that it reminds them or plays the psychological game that we are government. One of the most glaring examples that our audience can resonate with is the Federal Reserve, right? That's a private corporation that used a government-sounding name, and now everyone assumes after 100 years, it's literally been almost, just over 100 years, people assume it's government. So what are people going to assume about the Facebook Supreme Court in 100 years? That it's government. And I know that sounds crazy, but that's the way things go. It's the way they have gone, and that's why I'm worried. I know the censorship's not new, but Facebook claiming, even tongue-in-cheekly or by implicitly, not explicitly, that they have the force of power that comes from the collective sovereign citizens of the United States, that worries me. That worries me quite a bit. Even if it's just admitting something that's already true, right? Because it maybe kind of is true.
Look, I know we have some people watching in here that are operating in the legal world, right? That actually do that as a profession. And I know that because I just saw them jump in. And I also know that because some of them are on this program from time to time, Daniel Herrera in particular, right? And I know when they read a story like this, they might think to themselves like, well, look, I mean, like the courts of law in America, those are the ones that are always actually going to have the final word as to what is and is not the First Amendment. True, valid. As far as, legal context and legal precedent is concerned. But my take on this is exactly what you just said, Shine. And where, I would lend, some pushback and some play devil's advocate to Daniel Snowden's comment a second ago. I know he just likes to throw cynicism out there for the sake of being cynical, which is fine.
I love him.
But think about it this way. Yeah, you do. But think about it this way. It's exactly what you just said. Does it necessarily matter what the courts of America say, the courts of law in America say, if we are self-censoring? You get what I'm saying? The practical effect is what I'm talking about here. It doesn't necessarily matter what the First Amendment means or doesn't mean as far as the Supreme Court has said or how it should actually be interpreted in a legal context. If we're going to Facebook every single time, and if I can't post anything on Facebook because this court has told me that it's not acceptable under free speech, that is going to be the generally accepted consensus of what is and is not free speech in this country. And that's how people will operate. That's how they will live their lives. That's what I'm talking about. The greater impact on how people view the First Amendment arguably might come through something like this. I know that's a very dire thing to say about the stance of law in America and the stance of our courts in America. But let's be frank, y'all, like nobody's tuning in to oye.org to check out the most recent oral argument in the Supreme Court. It's just not that hip. It's not the cool. Like nobody cares, man. Nobody cares. They might care if it's like a super salacious headline, like Roe v. Wade was overturned because Kavanaugh did something strange. I don't know, man. Like maybe they'll be concerned about that, but they're not tuning in to like it's dry material. It's super dry material. But this stuff, people get into this stuff because it matters. It hits them directly at home. And the inevitable question then ends up becoming, all right, so not everyone. Statistically speaking, the majority of Americans that are polled, go check Gallup or anybody else that you want to. Statistically speaking, the majority of Americans that are polled, unfortunately, think that hate speech should be criminalized. Now, the majority could be anything from 50% or above, but last time I checked, at least with millennials, it was like 68%. Now, that 68% almost disappears when you ask them the follow-up question: who should define hate speech then? Do you get what I'm saying? Like, it's totally fine if hate speech
I
in
should.
California
That's
means,
everyone's answer.
Yeah, you should. Yeah,
everyone's answer is I should.
Yeah.
I'm the enlightened one. I am the blessed. I am the knower of truth, the bringer of the light. I should be the censor. I'm the one, to quote Apple CEO Tim Cook, I'm the one who should be the curator of the internet. I'm the one who can turn all of your garbage into beautiful charcuterie, which, by the way, if you don't know, that's fancy cut up meats, which Tim Cook probably really loves because he's a super elite like that. But there's a couple points I wanted to bring up based on what you just said, Mr. Henry. And thank you to everybody who's commenting in the chat. Just keep those coming, and we'll announce them on the show here. To me, when you're talking about a private institution acting like it has the force of law behind it, and just acting like it, pretending, right? Calling themselves the Supreme Court. Is there a lot of difference in what we talked about Monday with these business owners getting arrested and perp walked as a form of deterrence by government institutions to try to direct human behavior? Is there a difference between local municipalities doing that and what we saw with people on Facebook and YouTube and Twitter between 2015 and now, where you have these high-profile examples where people get a digital perp walk, and because they literally cannot pay enough people, and believe me, they're paying most of their employees at these big tech firms are people who censor people, are content curators. That's most of the employees. That's what most people are doing, is double checking all the things people are posting and seeing who needs to get their post getting rid of, or if the person needs to be taken down completely, because it takes that many people. So what they do is the same thing police do, is they do a high profile digital perp walk to deter your behavior. And what I'm saying is they're not just calling themselves the Supreme Court. They're using the same tactics as law enforcement to manipulate human behavior. And you said the Supreme Court will always be supreme over Facebook. I will challenge that right now. If I was the Supreme Court, could I really tell Facebook what to do?
No.
And you can't, because of U.S. law. U.S. law says that Facebook has the First Amendment. And for some reason, their First Amendment to censor you is more important than your First Amendment to post your stuff. So I challenge that the Supreme Court is supreme over the Facebook Supreme Court, Mr. Henry, because of your legislators and the fact that they included something in a piece of legislation in the 90s that was for like Netscape Navigator, and Yahoo emails and blog posts about movies, and are applying it to something almost 30 years later like it's the same thing, because the legislators won't get off their butts and update legislation and protect your rights. But I just wanted to bring those up. They're acting like government, and I don't think our government under current U.S. law could actually restrain them. So I don't know if the Supreme Court is supreme.
And I don't know, man. Look, honestly, bro, as we're talking about this, like I'm just catching myself right now. Again, vulnerability, breeding vulnerability, all that other nonsense I like to preach on here. It's not nonsense. It's for real, because I'm about to do it. Maybe this is not a terrible thing, all right? Maybe in the sense of, like, think about the weird analogy here, okay? But even for those that strongly detest Donald Trump, which is actually a sizable portion of our listening audience, believe it or not. For even those that detest Donald Trump, you would at least have to give him one thing, and agree with me on this, that the approach that he takes to American politics, this sort of brash, sort of unapologetic, it might be perpetual foot and mouth syndrome, I don't know, but he certainly doesn't apologize for anything. And he says stuff sometimes that is just so bombastic, it's so out there, you have to think, like, what just happened? But it starts conversations, does it not, Shine? At least we're talking about stuff. I always fall back on this example, but when he basically, when he was asked, like, all right, so why are we getting out of Syria? And his essential answer, I'm only kind of paraphrasing here, his essential answer was like, they don't have anything we want. Like, they don't have any oil. Like, they don't have anything we need. So I'm not going to waste a bunch of money in American lives being over there. And whether you think that is worthy of the office, the reverence of the office of the President of the United States, doesn't matter. What does matter for me is that he said it. Is that the President of the United States said it, and now we're all talking about, like, seriously, dude? Are we having major world wars over here for just, like, trying to get some resources? I don't know, possibly, but we're talking about that now.
It makes it easier to spend the money,
right? Right.
I mean, when you think like him, right? When you think that, like, we can't go in the red, or if we're going to go in the red, we're doing it as an investment for the future. That's the only thing that justifies going in the red. Nobody in business goes into the red because they're trying to be a good person. Nobody just bombs their business and spends money to not make money because they're just trying to be a good person. Nobody does that. Nobody. I mean, you don't do it. You wouldn't give your rent money to somebody and then get kicked out of your house to be a good person. And I'm not saying government should act that way, but it makes sense that he would look at it black and white like that.
Well, exactly.
That's why you hire advisors, though, right?
At least we're talking about it, though. And it's the same thing I said when we had the abortion conversation come back up again. When New York and Virginia were considering like 40-plus weeks, a 42-week, 41-week, whatever the 40-plus week abortion level was in the third trimester. And here in the southern states, we were talking about like no allowances at all. or a 5-week abortion ban. I mean, it was the virtual extremes of both sides. And initially I got frustrated with this, but then I fell back and I was like, at least we're talking about it. At least we're having a conversation that since 1972, we probably should have decided then that we should not have circumvented the legislature to get the Supreme Court to decide something for the rest of the country. We should have had the conversations we're having now a couple decades ago. So maybe, I don't know, this is for me trying to look positive, find the silver lining. Maybe I should find something with this Facebook stuff and think to myself, like, okay, hopefully, I believe in the best of people, man. I believe people are inherently intelligent, at least intelligent enough to make this type of discernment. Maybe people would look at what Facebook is doing, and if it touches home to them, maybe it grabs one of their posts or someone they know, or maybe one of the groups they're following posts something, and then that's removed. I don't know. Maybe we'll hit close enough to people start genuinely asking, like, wait a minute, dude, like, what is this censorship thing about? Because I'll put it this way. Again, an analogy I've relied upon in the past, but in California, they were about to pass a law, pass the House. It was stuck in the Senate. You could be fined up to $1,500 or placed in jail for a year if you misgendered, I believe is the proper terminology, a transgender individual in the medical community purposely, right? So if you went to go see a doctor in California, the person,
them,
yeah,
or misgendered them. Those were the two things. If you dead named them, or whatever the heck that means, we might have to have a guest on to define those terms for us someday,
right? So that makes sense in California. That makes sense in California where a transgender individual can be so upset that they want that to be protected under their First Amendment rights. Classifying hate speech is some type of criminal violation at that point. Well, alternatively, conversely, what in the world do you think would happen in Tennessee if we started playing that same game? It's going to be illegal to blaspheme Jesus Christ. I don't want that. I would hope no Christian would want that, at least sitting in the United States. Now, I don't like it. Certainly, I'm not going to condone it or support it, but that's an absurd thing to say as far as acceptable speech is concerned. Are you kidding me? That's what I'm saying, man, is once this thing finally pushes itself to the edge of people really starting to ask that question, okay, who is actually defining this for us? And I know they got some qualified people out here. Go read the story for yourself. But at the end of all of this, man, at the end of all of this is what this really to do is meant to change and alter human behavior. I'm hoping, I love to say it this way, Sean, I'm hoping that this might actually have a bit of a turn back on Facebook. This might actually have a little bit of a backfiring mechanism to it where people will start to push back because they're going to be made aware of something far before I think Facebook wanted them to be made aware of that, right? Be made aware of, like, all right, dude, so what is actual free speech? You're just pushing a civics 101 lesson.
Well, I keep coming back to, I'll come back again to our legislature in the U.S. and even in states has been lazy for a decade at least. Like the regulations, the federal regulations involving these kind of platforms should have been updated from 1996, the Federal Communications Act of 1996.
Yeah, I hear you.
I mean, I'm not saying what the solution is necessarily. I'm not a committee of really smart people with lots of data in front of me, but I do know that our society has changed a lot since 1996, especially in the way we interface with platforms. We wouldn't have been able to do this show in 1996. Heck, we couldn't have done this show in 2016. I mean, a lot of the technology, like even how easy it is to stream to multiple platforms, developed early this year, late last year. That was affordable for everybody. And that's a big change. Just having like a regular person be able to have a television studio in their house, that changes society. And our legislature should have stepped up to that. And I think Facebook, and in the absence of the legislature stepping up, we have this over-litigious society that is basically making law through the courts, through suing people and precedent. And Facebook and Twitter, both in 2015 and 16, just to use your example, there was cases about transgender people committing suicide and then suing these platforms. And they won. So what did Twitter and Facebook do? They had to. They had to show that they were doing something to prevent harm in the future. And what do we get? We get a solution that ends up restraining freedoms and is negative for everybody because it's a solution for a very small percentage of people who got their voice heard, who magnified their voice, right? They took action, interfaced with government, magnified their voice, and they got what they wanted to happen. And then we had the majority of the country sit on their hands and not magnify their voice, have optimism bias, keeping things normalcy bias, and assume nothing bad would ever happen to them, and they're the ones who got restrained. And part of what our legislature should be doing is making sure that, yes, the rights of extreme minorities are not infringed upon, but also that when you're protecting that extreme minority, that doesn't infringe on the majority of people's rights.
Yeah, right.
And that takes work. It takes time. It takes trying things, maybe even failing at things. But I'm tired of this lack of engagement from our legislature when it involves one of our most prime rights. And that's not really a right. It's something I'm able to do, that God gave me the ability to do, to speak or express myself or to organize with other people and express a mass message. That's fundamental. All the other things, a lot of people say Second Amendment's fundamental. I know it is. It's like right there. But I think First Amendment is slightly above it, because how can you defend it? Your right to have the weapon if you can't use your mouth, if you can't associate with friends. And I really blame the legislature. I know this sounds crazy, but I don't really blame the tech companies, because they're responding to our over-litigious society, and look where they're located. Look what courts they're going to be sitting in front of when they get sued. Of course it's going to lean that way, in the absence of federal guidance and of federal law saying, please protect free speech. They're going to protect everybody else and not protect free speech.
I think you hit some of that right on the head when you obviously said that they're responding to things. They're responding to a litigious society. They're responding also, I think, to just, like, frankly speaking, some terrible coverage, some terrible media spin. All right. Like, I'm not trying to be the fake news guy right now. This is a show entitled Real News. I'm not trying to jump on the Trump bandwagon of just like labeling media the enemy of the people type thing. But let's be for real, man. Like, sometimes not only do they get it wrong, but sometimes media is not just disingenuous. They are purposely misleading. Now, let me start, oddly enough, with an Axios story that came out yesterday entitled, here's the headline, Trump and some top aides question accuracy of virus death tolls. And I'll move quickly into the topic of how I'm connecting this together with the media being misleading. Here's the headline, though. Trump has complained to advisors about the way coronavirus deaths are being calculated, suggesting that the real numbers are actually lower. And a number of his senior advisors apparently share this view. Now, this is according to sources with direct knowledge. And if you don't know Axios came about just a few years back, but it seems like they have some inside track somewhere. They usually get predictions pretty accurately. And they get
My
predictions
theory is
pretty
that
accurately.
it was like a couple editors from like either big television or newspapers.
Yeah.
Because they do seem to get, I mean, they had a interview with the president of the United States when nobody could get one back in 2016.
Yeah.
And I was like, how did you even get that interview? Who are you, Axios? But they do like using that phrase, people close to the situation, people with knowledge of the situation. But I do think Trump wouldn't have come out and said that unless he could get Dr. Birx or Dr. Fauci on camera saying the same thing. Probably. Anyway, go ahead. I'm so sorry.
Well, but they come on to say that a senior administrative official said that he expects the president to begin publicly questioning the death toll as it closes in on his predictions for the final death count and damages him politically. Now, the U.S. death toll surpassed 71,000 recently, with more than 1.2 million confirmed cases, according to the latest figures from CDC and others, I suppose. Trump's engagement could amplify a partisan gulf we saw last week in Axios's Ipsos coronavirus index, and that's what I want to pull up here. All right. I'll pull this up right now, show you on the screen of the polling data that they're talking about, because this lends an idea of what I was talking about going into the Facebook story, where, like, all right, some of these numbers that you're looking at right now is not necessarily, and I know this is going to sound dumb because I just jumped from being able to trust people. Some of these numbers right now is not necessarily the fault of the American people. All right. Some of this is them just sort of being rationally, and not irrationally, rationally led into a great mistrust for media, a great mistrust for the way things are covered. And we said it multiple times right now on the show, man. It's a frustrating time to live in because empiricism doesn't quite mean all that much anymore. Empirical data, objective sources, source data.
I mean, look at the article you're reading. The premise of the article had no source. The premise was, I'm sorry, I'm eating something, but the premise was Trump thinks this and other people think it too, and we have no source for that. According to people close to the situation, whatever that means, but that's just proving your point. The market doesn't seem to care because people still read Axios.
Well, and you see right here, man, do you believe the number of Americans dying from COVID-19 is more or less or about the same? I mean, you can see the graphs laid out for as you see right now, but I mean, obviously, most Americans say that they doubt that the U.S. death count they doubt the U.S. death count, but whether they think it's actually higher or lower depends on whether they're Democrats or Republicans, is according to this latest installment. And obviously, they go down to give you some indication as to what source you're watching leads you to think one way or another. And I'll say this, man, like, let me just go ahead, since we're on my screen anyways, I'll go ahead and jump over to this because everyone's covering it, and slightly because it helps prove my point right now.
And it's always good to give Project Veritas some screen time. Man, way to give them an ad. Hey, these are people you should support, by the way. You can support them financially, or share their videos, or share their tweets. These are some of the only real journalists in media in the United States who actually do on-the-ground investigative reporting, provide sources, because the whole video is a source. This is the complete opposite of this Axios article, where they will tell you exactly where they got the info, and they'll show you who did it and get it from their own mouths. I love Project Veritas. James O'Keefe is a hero. I was going to say, man, and actually two of the folks we're featuring on Real News today, James O'Keefe and Kayleigh McEnany, both Real News alum, man, both been on the program back in the day. Yes. Good
stuff. Big shout out to Richard Esparza for a lot of that too, setting up some of this. All right, so back to the story at hand, all right? So look, the idea here of being tied back into the Facebook stuff, Facebook is also responding to some of this quote-unquote alleged fake news, and that's part of the problem that I'm having now. When I look at that Axios story, and it's seemingly separating between Democrats and Republicans, and the independents right down the middle of the line. Some, less Republicans believe that the numbers are true. More Democrats believe the numbers are true. But it's not just that. It's now separated into the fringes again. It's not just that Democrats believe that the numbers are true. Let me jump back over here one more time. It's that they believe that a lot of Democrats believe that the numbers are higher than they were actually even indicated before.
Yeah, it's because they believe that Trump has an incentive to keep him lower for his reelection. That's the theory there, is that he's keeping the numbers lower so he can win reelection.
So look at this, more. 63% think that it's more.
I know.
You get what I'm saying, bro?
Well, that shows you, too, that like they're a more polarized party. Within their party, they're more polarized than the Republicans or independents. That's something you should get from that graph, and it's not the only research that's shown that.
And again, I'll go to this James O'Keefe video. It's about 2 minutes long. If you haven't seen it already, I'm sure most of the Real News audience has. Just let it play out for itself. I'll give you CBS News' response here, and just understand where I'm coming from for a little bit of this, okay? Facebook is responding to what is allegedly fake news. I'm out there questioning, like, all right, so what is fake news, though, bro? Seriously, listen to this. Hold on, I don't think they can hear that. Sorry, man, that's my fault. Let me reshare this.
No problem, man. Hey, and just make sure too, Mr. Henry, that the volume is like at 70%, and we should be good.
Here you go.
You're telling me you're 100% certain that CBS News Corporation, National, staged a fake event. They faked the news. They faked the reality and broadcasted that to all of their audience last Friday on CBS This Morning.
100%, absolutely.
And apparently, the news crew wanted more people in the line because they knew it was scheduled.
Well, we knew they were coming. We had no clue that we were going to have to, do fake patients.
Did she tell you guys, hey, you're not actually getting tested?
Yeah. Yeah, she did. Well, just to make it look busy for the news because they were right there.
That's crazy. Well, I didn't see you guys do the swab at all. I just saw you talking with them. And then I was talking with the other girl.
There were a couple of real patients, which made it worse.
They probably just wanted it to look busy. It's my guess.
I'm James O'Keefe.
You see what just happened there, man, right? Like, it doesn't take an outrageous amount of explanation. I mean, the video might have been a little bit choppy, but at least the audio was coming through. I'm hopeful. And look, this is all I'm saying in this. Let me start this whole chain off by saying, John, I am the first to fully acknowledge that selective editing takes place at Project Veritas. I have no problem admitting that at all.
Oh, good.
I actually asked James O'Keefe about. But he
always releases the full video every time.
He does.
Every time he releases the source material.
I actually asked James O'Keefe about that very issue, but the selective editing stuff when he was on the program. So I remain consistent to that the entire time. I just want to get that out of the way ahead of time because I know that is going to be the inevitable retort. and any good argumentation to start with, at least trying to rebut the initial, what you know is going to be that inevitable retort. With that being said, I get that this is a lot of selective editing, but the response from CBS was just absurd. The response from CBS, I have it right here. CBS has removed a portion of the CBS This Morning segment on coronavirus testing that featured a Michigan hospital, but the network denies claims made in a new Project Veritas video that CBS News was behind any effort to stalk a line of cars, which is exactly what you saw happening right there. What they were describing was getting medical people to go sit in their personal cars while at least a few real people were trying to get tested. The majority of them apparently were folks that were just working at the hospital.
That made it worse.
Made it worse because the real people had to wait in line longer. The real people that were trying to get stuff actually done, trying to get actually tested that might have actual symptoms or, God forbid, may have had the actual virus, they had to just hang out while CBS could get a better B-roll shots. Here's CBS's response. They said instead the network said that the hospital, Cherry Health, informed us for the first time that one of their chief officers told at least one staffer to get in the testing line along with real patients. So first of all, CBS's response to this, in spite of the fact that I just acknowledged selective editing might be going on, CBS's response to this thing is, well, look, I don't know. Yeah, I'll give it to you that maybe one fake person was in line, but I'm just going to go ahead and throw the entire hospital under the bus while I'm at it. It's not our fault. We didn't necessarily ask them to do that. We don't have any say as to whether or not the hospital staff just goes and waits in line.
Our network. We are actually the only ones responsible. We're the ones who have a license with the FCC. We're the ones who when we got our news license back in the early 1900s, we promised to. I know a lot about FCC license. They make promises in those to do the public good. They make promises like that. It's their license. They don't get to dump that on a hospital. And I want to point this out too. There are many, 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 many people, thousands, maybe tens of thousands, who have been deplatformed for the same kind of thing, of setting up a false situation, claiming that it was news in order to get views or listens or clicks, whatever CBS's rationale was there. Whatever their rationale was, there have been people who've been deplatformed for this, and will be in the future. And I've never seen people talk about a certain kinds of privilege. That's been a meme for over 3 years now. A certain kind of privilege, and I think there's no more glaring privilege in the United States than the elite privilege. If you are part of the elite system, you get to do anything you want. While everyone else, if they did the same thing, would be cut off from society. You'd be deplatformed for it. And I know that maybe I'm being a little hyperbolic. I'm just sick and tired of it. There's regular people who've done stuff more benign than this and been deplatformed. Right. And the fact that they would try to offload the blame, and I really think they're offloading the blame because their FCC license, because that really exposes them to some federal stuff. If people actually made some complaints to the FCC, that's probably why they took it down. Because the FCC doesn't screw around. Especially in this. We just had a bunch of new legislation about fake news and the authority, whatever. Over the past couple of years, it's at least a thing in the bureaucracy. I don't know if it's a thing in law. I don't know if they actually wrote law. But there's definitely stuff in the bureaucracy of the federal government about big networks or big platforms putting out the wrong information. And I bet a lot of it has to do with the FCC. I don't know. My thing is that they pulled the segment. That's admitting fault. And they could have admitted fault and said, you know what, they could have blamed it on a producer in their own company. They could have blamed it on a personality. They could have
thrown one of their own under the bus.
Thrown one of their own under the bus and either said they're suspended or fired or whatever. They could have not done that. They could have just said this one producer did it. Action is being taken. 2 sentences. But the fact that they threw that hospital under the bus is, let's call it, deplorable.
No, let's call it deplorable. That's exactly what it is, man. Because I keep going back to, all right, so the CBS response, what am I supposed to think? That just like on an average random given day, that the hospital employees are just going to line up in a line to get tested for COVID-19 coronavirus just because that's what they do? I don't know, because they wanted to be a part of the they had some personal motivation to make the B-roll shot look better for CBS.
That's also trying to make it a thing where regular people want to go get tested. They're trying to make that a thing because what's the implication? It's not a thing because people are not worried about it.
See, and
so
that's
the deal. Man. That's where their bias is really just infecting everything they do. They have a certain opinion about the way they want the world to be, and then they go fake news to try to move Overton windows in order to make that a reality. And that's not why we have news companies. We don't have news companies to create new realities. That's what regular people are for.
And then we so quickly forget when it happened the last time around. We so quickly forget that we saw just the same thing like a month or two ago or 6 months ago or a year ago. We so quickly forget that the publications that we now put so much trust in may have had problems in the past as well. Check out this clip right here from new White House press secretary. I personally think she just killed at least this response yesterday. Again, Real News alum on the program before when she was national spokesperson for the RNC.
Get out. I didn't know you had her on the air. Get out.
Yeah, man. Yeah,
you had all the stars. Good.
But listen to this response right here, man. This is right in the vein of what we're talking about today, and I think she does a great job. Listen here.
Previous life, before you were press secretary, you worked for the campaign, and you made a comment, I believe, on Fox, in which you said President Trump will not allow the coronavirus to come to this country. Given what has happened since then, obviously, would you like to take that back?
I'm sure everyone heard that, but in case you didn't, he asked, you made a statement before saying that that President Trump said that he will not allow the coronavirus to come to this country. Given what has happened now, would you like to take that statement back? First, I don't know what he's expecting to get out of this question. I mean, honestly, what would you hope would be the response? Yes, you're right. I'm sorry. Whatever. Listen to your response.
She should have responded with, I hope you get coronavirus. That's what she should have responded with. Well, because he's being a butthole. You know? Like he's being, I'm trying not to use a bad word, but insert bad word here. He's being a donkey. A donkey hole. That's what he's doing. And I would have responded with, I don't have to answer those stupid questions, you moron. Next. But that's why I'm not White House press secretary.
Now you know why Trump just is like, no, screw it, dude. No, because day one, he was over with it. Day one. And listen to her response, though, man. Listen to this.
Well, first, let me note, I was asked a question on Fox Business about the president's travel restrictions. I noted what was the intent behind those travel restrictions, which is we will not see the coronavirus come here. We will not see terrorism come here, referring to an earlier set of travel restrictions. I guess I would turn the question back on the media and ask similar questions. Does Vox want to take back that they proclaim that the coronavirus would not be a deadly pandemic? Does the Washington Post want to take back that they told Americans to get a grip? The flu is bigger than the coronavirus. Does the Washington Post likewise want to take back that our brains are causing us to exaggerate the threat of the coronavirus? Does the New York Times want to take back that fear of the virus may be spreading faster than the virus itself? Does NPR want to take back that the flu was a much bigger threat than the coronavirus? And finally, once again, the Washington Post.
Stop. It's
would
too
they like
brutal.
to take back that the government aggressively?
She's dropping the mic so hard.
I'll leave you with those questions. Maybe you'll have some answers.
She said, I'll leave you with those questions. Maybe you'll have some answers, dude. You get what I'm saying?
And of course, someone probably followed up with, well, we're not the press secretary of the United States of America. Like they always do. Wow. What Grant, that was unbelievable. And I think at the very least, whether you agree with her or not, she's going to be a decent press secretary, because that almost feels like that question was set up for her. Like that guy was in on it.
It does, right? It was such a massive swing back, dude. It was a grand slam putback. Like you're pitching at I got this 97-mile-per-hour fastball. I'm gonna swing. I'm right down center play. Oh, are you? Yeah, grand slam. It was a setup. It felt like, because it was such a good response. Almost. I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, almost too good. It was almost too good. It was almost too good. But I'll suspend disbelief and pretend like that was completely organic. I'll do that. But either way, it's a fair point, right? It's but it also is a fair point from the media. I mean, I hate being like, I don't like the way they say it, but it is fair for the media to say, hey, you said this before, you were wrong. Have you learned anything? That would be a nicer way to do it. Have you learned anything that you'd like to share with the American people? Because you were wrong. You know, you were wrong. And so, like, if you learn anything, would you like to restate that in a different way? That would be a fair question that I think that our government should answer those kinds of questions. You were wrong. Did you learn
I totally
anything?
agree.
But
I totally agree. And if
I also
anybody
don't
on
like the
either
idea
side,
of the press secretary maybe setting up questions. I don't like that idea either.
I know, because it honestly did. It felt way too good for it to be an organic question.
She may just
right?
be really good at her job.
She may be, and she might have just had the stats there.
She may have some really great people who work around her because there have been some gotcha questions. You kind of just got to prepare for gotcha questions because they're about half the question and answer. I'm sorry, I'm getting off on all these weird kind of media critique tangents. Why you said you were going to relate that back to other stuff, and I've kind of interrupted you.
Man, honestly, it may just be. It sounded so good that it sounded like a plan. It looked like a plan, or honestly, bro, it may just be that's how predictable the media has become. Like that's how much you can see through them now, right? Like the same, and Trump, because Trump has become so frustrated with it. The frustration, they're wearing this hypocrisy on their sleeve, almost that they're proud of it, and they are proud of it. A lot of them are proud of their own hypocrisy, man. And on both sides here. I'm
just listen to them talk about Joe Biden.
Exactly,
like that tweet you showed on the show the other day, where they're like, "I believe." They basically said, "I believe you" to Tara Reid in their tweet. Miss Bloom. It was the tweet from Bloom. She said, "I believe you, Tara Reid, but I'm still going to vote for Joe Biden." They brag about their inconsistency. They brag about that stuff. They put it out there. So
maybe it's just that the media has become so predictable in their own hypocrisy. And what you just said a second ago, that's a valid question to ask. If that same publication were going to ask the same question of everybody in leadership, of everybody in the country, if the question was something like this, Ms. Press Secretary, let me ask. Okay, so that the president's administration, you all said that we weren't going to have a problem with this coming in. Now, at the same time, Nancy Pelosi and other leadership, it seems like all leadership at this point has said that we really haven't had a problem. Well, how do you think we should walk that back? And going forward, if we do reintroduce this again, if it does become reintroduced in the fall, how do leadership take a cue from the lessons learned of the past? That would have been a decent question. I would have responded to that one. Okay, fair question. We all got it wrong. What are we going to do so we all don't get it wrong again? That wasn't the question, though, was it?
Yes, and if you notice, she kind of answered that question. When I was speaking to that, I was speaking to the intent of the policy. The intent. I was expressing the intent. That's a good answer. The intent of the policy, which is that's what we wanted the intention to be. The intention of the policy back in January or February, whenever, I think it was late January or early February, the travel restrictions. The intent should have been keep the coronavirus out of the United States.
Yes.
That should have been the intention. That's what you wanted people to think.
I go back to this poll that we're looking at right now that ties all the way back into the Facebook story that we started this whole thing with, y'all. I think a lot of what we just laid out there, a lot of the CBS story from Project Veritas of CBS apparently, allegedly, now arguably somewhat provably actually setting up people that are not actually getting tested for the coronavirus in a car line so that their B-roll shots look better. And I'm sure what that is some, amateur producer or some person that's low level in the company thinking, I can't walk back in to my supervisors and giving them a role with a single car sitting in there. They're not going to put that on the screen. I will basically have gone out to do a remote shot and I will come back with nothing at all. I cannot justify that to my superiors. I'm not arguing. I'm not even trying to justify that response. I'm not even rationalizing that response. I'm just saying that's probably the thought line that went through their head. But in so doing, they add their own 2 cents to this terrible narrative that has become you can't trust anything that's coming out of the media. And I don't even know who you go to trust anymore. All that taken into consideration of what McEnany just did, of laying out like, okay, yeah, we got it wrong. But what about these 7 publications, NPR included in there, the 7 publications that also got it wrong? You can ask about that? Can anybody be honest about what's going on? Can we have any sense of consistency? I think when you take all that into account and you look at some stats like this, some of this starts to make a little bit more sense. Some of this starts to make a little bit more sense than why people are going back to this Axios article and saying that behind the scenes, the officials are saying that Trump has vented that the numbers seem inflated. And is actually apparently in these White House meetings has brought up New York's addition of more than 3,000 unconfirmed suspected COVID-19 cases to their death toll. Some members of the presidential team believe that the government has created a distorting fictional narrative and a distorting financial incentive for hospitals to identify coronavirus cases.
Well, and we've already seen people in state leadership like Andrew Cuomo lie about certain needs saying we'll need, I think the biggest example was we need 100,000 ventilators in the state of New York. They gave them 40,000, and I may be off on these numbers, and I'm really sorry if I am. But the general premise, I know for sure. They gave them like 40,000, and then several tens of thousands of those sat in storage and were never used. And then he complained that he didn't get the 100,000. And I think you can take that that's a little, I hope I explained it well, because I'm going to use it to explain other stuff. It's a little Rosetta Stone to look at this whole thing. There are definitely states that are inflating their problem to get more resources, or maybe not inflating their problem. I could even give them the benefit of the doubt and be saying, we are afraid it will get to this level, so give us more resources. But either way, I think there are states generally across all government services inflating certain issues. Ventilator was just an easy one. Some of these state bailout stuff, and I think a lot of it comes back to that. I think they're inflating numbers so they can get bailed out. I think they're inflating numbers so they can just get straight resources. They can get straight
Axios is reporting right
payments.
here that Medicare is giving hospitals a 20% bonus for their treatment. I'm reading directly from the Axios article. Medicare is giving hospitals a 20% bonus for their treatment of coronavirus patients as a way to help them make up money for what they're losing because they've had to postpone a lot of non-coronavirus case care. Even factually speaking, there's a very real financial incentive for hospitals to mark something down. Now, again, intentional misdiagnosing patients with coronavirus, that would be categorical fraud across the board. And so far, no one in the administration, Trump's administration or otherwise, state administrations anywhere, has actually levied public accusations that there is fraud going on. But this is what I'm saying. Take the totality of the circumstances into account, if you will. Take everything that we've covered today. The James O'Keefe story of CBS setting up stuff, the Kelly McEnany going through the number of cases that they're not reporting on now. Everybody's inconsistency on this. Everybody getting it wrong. And now you start to see some of this stuff creeping in where people are starting to say, like, look, man, I'm not necessarily asserting that there's fraud in there. But if you're giving someone a financial incentive to do something and you're shutting the rest of the portion of the hospital down, it's at least reasonable to have that conversation. And if it's reasonable to have that conversation, it also makes some of those statistics we looked at a second ago reasonable to think that a sizable portion of this country does not believe the statistics that they're being given. And then you couple all that, Sean, with what is the world standard supposed to be on these stats? The CDC and the WHO. Dude, what do we know about the WHO now, bro? It's like you can't trust a single thing that entire organization has done from the beginning, from day one of this. And day one arguably was like October or something of last year. Who knows? That is just a pure speculation on my behalf. Let me say that now. But who knows when day one actually was? Who knows when the WHO actually got advice or a knowledge of this coming out of Wuhan or wherever it came out of? I don't know. But that's what I'm saying, dude. From the very beginning, it seems like this whole thing's not just been a massive cover-up. It's a massive misleading. So you can't really blame the American populace when something comes up like this, man.
I'm saying, and I'll say this again, there was someone who ran for president in 2012 who said the biggest deficit we had in the United States was not a financial one. It was a trust one. In 2012. In 2012, I always forget his name. Former ambassador to China, has a really beautiful daughter who's on Fox News and MSNBC sometimes. John Huntsman? There we go. John Huntsman. He said, and I thought it was the most profound thing said in the entire election cycle by any candidate, including the one who won. But even including the Republican nominee and the Democratic nominee and all the nominees. But we do have a trust deficit, and it is only compounded and doubled and tripled and quadrupled since 2012.
Yeah, man.
And it's only getting worse. And the fact that hasn't specifically played into the danger of this situation is incredible. It actually speaks a lot to how much people trust their local governments, because people don't trust the federal government. They just don't. I mean, go look at the approval numbers for Congress. People don't believe them. And only certain people believe the president. And then a whole bunch of people, no matter what, assume that he's lying all the time. There's these weird kind of, if you're this person, this is how information will interface with you. Everybody's getting a little bit programmed, a little bit reactionary, and not using the old noodle up here. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that has to do with not being able to trust things. because when you can't trust things, when it's unknown, right? That's when you start getting frustrated. That's when you get angry. I mean, that's why humans do a lot of violent things, is because of the unknown, because that's scary. Because as soon as you can get a handle on something, you can make a plan. And when you make a plan and you're working it out, your brain actually releases drugs that make you feel better. But when your brain can't figure it out and says, we are in danger and we don't know how to figure it out, that's when you start producing that fight or flight chemical. And you get into that not violent space, but it's the space you'd be in if you were being hunted or hunting. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there, you know.
And why push people to that level? I mean, at least during something like this. I mean, to sell ads, to remain relevant, to not fail as a business. I don't know, dude. I don't know. I mean, clearly I know. Obviously, everybody knows. I mean, like, it's been around for as long as human history's been around. I'm just questioning back to square one of what you just said, man. Like, why push people into a fight or flight type of situation? Because then what ends up happening is what, finishing the show with this story today, we end up having people that own hair salons in Texas that will stay open in defiance of these orders because they feel like they've been pushed into defending themselves and their family. And I can't
give everybody the updates on that story, because we covered it pretty hard, and there's been some great updates, including an update from the Texas Attorney General.
Yeah, that's actually what it was. Pulling the story up right now. Here, I'll put up.
Well, as you're pulling up, I'll do a little review of the original story. You had it was the salon owner, right? Not the bar owner.
Yeah,
the salon owner.
Salon owner, right?
Yeah, and she was arrested for cutting hair, and then the judge. They couldn't convict her. So the judge said, you just need to apologize because I can't actually convict you. I don't know if that's what happened, but it seems like that's what happened. And she said, I'm not going to apologize for trying to make money. Are you kidding? And then she got put in jail for 7 days for contempt. And now her story went viral, and we have a response from the Texas Attorney General, and I'm assuming others, and Grant is ready with that update.
Yeah. And this is obviously what Shine just described yesterday, or just a second ago. This happened earlier or late last week, I believe, and we're just now getting updates in the story. She was sentenced to 7 days in jail and a $7,000 fine. 7 days in jail and a $7,000 fine for exactly what Shine just described, because she wouldn't apologize. Apparently, if she would have apologized, all would have been forgiven and she could go back home. Now, updating the story.
Just kiss the ring. Just kiss the ring. Just
man.
Just bow. And everything will go away. How many movies have you seen that? I mean, as I'm saying that, think of all the movies where you've seen this lord or king somewhere, or some priest, god person who's like, all will be forgiven if you bow and kiss the ring. That's what that judge was saying.
That's right, exactly.
I have no force of law. I have no force of law, but I do have this fancy robe, and I'm not trying to make fun of judges. I'm making fun of people who think their office or their institution is the same thing as them. It's not. It's not the same thing as them personally. And that's what this woman did, in my opinion. And I'm just a regular Joe. But anyway, I'm burying the lead. I'm so sorry.
No, I'm glad we went hard on this yesterday. I really am glad we went hard, because it was a slight risk in risking what are the state attorney general in Texas and what is the governor going to come back in response to this. Because if they came back and said, like, no, well, we agree, we might have had to come back and say, like, we went hard yesterday and we were wrong. But no, with the backing of Republican governor, I'm reading from the headline that y'all are seeing on your screen right now. With the backing of Republican governor, the Texas attorney general is urging Dallas judge to free the salon owner he jailed Tuesday. It was Tuesday of this week, I suppose, after she refused to apologize for keeping her business open in violation of the governor's order. The Office of Attorney General actually penned a letter that he's described abuse when he says that she was unjustly jailed. In a tweet, Paxton, this guy Ken Paxton's his name, said that she should immediately be released from jail. Quote, locking her up is misguided abuse of power, especially considering Dallas County released real criminals to protect them from COVID-19. In his letter, Paxton said that as a small business owner, quote, as a small business owner, she wanted to help her employees feed their children. Needless to say, these are laudable goals that warranted the exercise of enforcement discretion. Right, that's the attorney general going on. Now, if that wasn't enough, Republican Governor Greg Abbott said that he joins the attorney general in, quote, disagreeing with the excessive action by the Dallas judge. Here's his exact quote. As I have made clear through prior pronouncements, jailing Texans for non-compliance with executive orders should always be a last available option. Compliance with executive orders during this pandemic is important to ensure public safety. However, surely there are less restrictive means to achieving that goal than jailing a Texas mother. And if we said this, we were talking yesterday, Sean, about how like maybe we should be worried about the $7,000 fine because she's, getting close to going out of business. You can't pay her employees and having to furlough people. And
you called it. I think you were the one who predicted she's going to do fine on GoFundMe and probably have more money than she's ever had in her life.
She's at $300,000 right now.
Yeah,
so she's fine. $300,000, she'll be all right. Yeah.
So I'm pretty sure I know that this judge is probably a middle-aged woman. Let me tell you why. Because this woman's really pretty. If this had happened to a short, ugly, fat guy, we wouldn't be having this story right now. I hate saying that, but it's real. We live in the world of the internet, right? We live in the world of Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. It's all about images. And that may seem unfair to say. And maybe the thing about saying she's a middle-aged woman, too, is unfair, too. But, I feel like, what an idiot judge. And I called it yesterday, that this would not end in anything but this judge's power being decreased. And this happens all the time. Where people exert authority where they shouldn't, it doesn't increase their authority. It decreases it because people voluntarily follow your authority. Voluntarily. I don't care if there's law. And I know people in law don't like me talking about this because they like to think of the law as set in stone. But judges need to realize, especially in an emergency situation where it is, in that article you had pulled up there was the word tinderbox. That's where we are right now. You don't do stupid things like tell a really pretty woman who can go post on Facebook, oh, woe is me, a mother, a business owner, in this time period, apologize to me, not to the state, apologize, because it's a contempt order. It's apologize to me, the judge. And this will, getting you've been involved in law, Mr. Henry. Tell me if I'm wrong. The governor getting in the news and criticizing your ruling, the attorney general of the state you live in criticizing your ruling, that is going to affect future rulings.
Oh, for sure. Oh, yeah.
And it's not nearly as bad as an appellate court saying that your ruling was bad. It's not that bad, but it's pretty bad. And to pretend that public opinion and the things politicians say don't affect judges, you're insane. I know that people in the law like to pretend like that's the case because everything in the law happens in a vacuum, right? That's not true. Just, look at what we saw with them investigating Trump. How many people got arrested for doing things in public that could affect a trial? I don't know. I go back to this person tried to exercise authority that she really didn't have, and it decreased her power. And institutions should learn from that. You can't arbitrarily enforce things like that. And I think, too, she didn't just decrease her power. She decreased the power of these county judges across the state of Texas as well. And I don't know if you know this, Mr. Henry, maybe you do, but in Texas, judges are a little different than Tennessee. Judges have a lot more power. They're almost like they share some powers with the executive branch in some parts of Texas. So saying decreasing power of judges is reorganizing the political power of the state. And I know it's only a little bit of power taken away, but when someone important criticizes you, I don't know. I think it was a huge mistake, and she'll be paying for it for the rest of her career.
Absolutely. Absolutely she will, man, because she's now sort of tarnished the reputation of that position for the entire state. She's actually tarnished a lot of the entire state's reputation as far as is considered amongst the rest of the states. Because Texas likes to be considered a freedom-loving type of bush-driving type of whatever you want to say type state thing, man. And all
by the way,
sudden,
that judge was a dude, supposedly. So there you go. I was wrong.
But I will say, ending with a few comments from Facebook here, and then just one headline I want to tap because I didn't actually brief the story. It's just the headline was somewhat uplifting to me. Whatever. Eric says in Facebook a second ago, there is a group of sheriffs around the country who have started a group that concentrates on defending the Constitution. One of them was on a recent Tom Woods episode. Very cool. Talking about what these judges can and can't do right now, what citizens can do to arm themselves against the tyranny. It's interesting to listen to. I'm gonna have to give that a listen for sure. Jonathan actually said in Facebook a second ago, I love that AG response. Yeah, man, that AG's response was right on. And here's the headline I want to end with today. Look, I don't know how accurate this individual is. If previous predictions or any indication of the probability of getting future predictions correct, then hopefully we can rest on this. But economic experts from Duke University, he said perfect prediction record in calling previous recessions over the last several decades or whatever. He's betting that this particular recession will be over by the end of 2020. Now, he's not talking about a full-on V-shaped return, like we had a V-shaped decline. He's talking about like a narrow U, if you will. But that's also, I suppose, because of the phased reopening of the economy. So I don't know, man. There you go.
This era will be defined by people describing our economic as letters.
Yeah.
I really feel like it's Sesame Street every time I hear people talking about a V-shaped recovery.
This letter is you. Economy.
Today's brought to you by the letter W.
Yeah,
because we're gonna have a
W-shaped
downtrend. Right? It's like, who was the person with the doctorate in economics that says, I know how we can make the regular stupid public understand. We'll use letters like Sesame Street.
It looks like a V, right? Just call it a V trend. They'll be cool.
Whenever they do that, I feel like I don't know, not you obviously, but when I see that, is that weird that I feel like condescended every time I hear people describe these things as a letter? I think it's really funny and weird or whatever, but we're not going to have a V. It's going to be more like a W or maybe a Q. Maybe a Q-shaped recovery.
I would like to see a Q recovery. Like, what is the tail on the Q? It's like, good, terrible, good, now awful. Just awful. Dude, that's where the murder hornets come.
This is probably a terrible joke, but that's that little line, that's where all the multiple arrests are. You know, that's
honestly, the tail on the Q is the murder hornets coming in.
Yeah, that's
exactly apparently
right.
the new thing that we need to be scared about it.
Grant, we're just too silly today. I think that we had too much fun last night.
We did. Man, we've been working hard this week, bro. Oh man. All right, we're gonna probably end it today. Shine's pulling up the outro music here. We do have a show tomorrow coming back, doing it big as well. Make sure to go to the top of the description of this program. The thing you see directly under the title of the show there is the reject bailouts letter. This goes directly to the legislator. Help us out with that. If you believe in the cause, definitely sign up for sure. But also do Shine and I a favor here, man. Help us out by pushing that. It's this thing that we strongly believe in. If you trust us enough to say that this is going to be a terrible, terrible decision for the country if we just shackle future generations with the financial burden of our past. Just don't do that anymore.
It's the worst thing they're proposing in the new CARES Act, too, is the tens of billions or maybe hundreds of billions bailing out states and municipal governments. Please help us stop it.
Check at the bottom of the show notes today. Last thing I put in there, it has a full breakdown of the things they're considering. Let me stress that strongly. Considering in the CARES Act 2.0. And last thing there, click that bell at the top right of your screen there. If you're watching this right now, it's the notification bell. Click it to all or at least highlights. You'll see when we go live every single morning. But all right, y'all, signing off this morning. Love y'all. My name is Mr. Henry. David Shine Thompson over there. See you tomorrow.